history's most coveted assets. A mesmerizing yellow metal. It has built empires and destroyed civilizations. Since it was first ripped from the heart of the earth, wars have been fought over it, and men have killed and died for it. In the 1st century before Christ, the Roman poet Virgil warned of man's obsession with gold, calling it a cursed thirst. 1,500 years later, an Italian explorer discovered a new world and set in motion an oppressive and ruthless search for gold that would result in the disappearance of a civilization. On August 3rd, 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail on the greatest voyage of discovery in history, in search of a western passage to Asia. As he contemplated his destiny, Columbus prayed,
O Lord, in whose hands are all things, be my help. Direct me that I might find the gold.
2 months later, on October 12th, he came upon an inhabited island that he claimed for Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain. Not knowing that the Americas lay directly in his path, Columbus thought he had landed in what they called the Indies, the eastern part of Asia. And one of the first things he noticed when he encountered the natives, whom he called Indians, was that they wore gold.
Saturday, 13th of October, 1492. They wore skeins of cotton thread, parrots, darts, and other small things, which it would be tedious to recount. I was attentive, and took trouble to ascertain if there was gold. I saw that some of them had small pieces fastened in a hole they have in the nose.
Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain wanted gold. They knew that that was what they needed to finance their power, to maintain their power and to increase it.
Columbus's claim for the Indies put Spain and her neighbor Portugal at the brink of war. The Vatican had granted the Portuguese exclusive jurisdiction over the Indies some 40 years earlier, even though Portuguese explorers had never been there.
So we had competing claims. Both countries were Catholic countries, and in order to avoid conflict, they went to the Pope.
Spain had an advantage. The newly elected Pope was Alexander VI, a Spaniard who was loyal to Isabella and Ferdinand.
He decreed that a line would be drawn that would divide the world between the Spanish and the Portuguese. And because of that decree, all of Latin America speaks Spanish, with the exception of the northeastern corner, which is today Brazil, which speaks Portuguese.
The Pope's division of the world helped avert a war, but would soon provide a justification for the European conquest of the Americas. One of the first settlements in the New World was a colony on the island of Hispaniola. The Spaniards Columbus left there found gold, then enslaved the natives to mine it. The gold would be sent back to Isabella and Ferdinand. Some of that gold can be found here, at the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. It was a thank you gift to Pope Alexander from the Spanish king and queen.
In the 15th century, the end of the 15th century, beginning of the 16th, a new ceiling was put in, and that ceiling was decorated with gold that, according to tradition, is from among the first gold that came from the New World, from the Americas. And when you look up at that ceiling, it seems as if parts of the ceiling are solid gold.
Columbus died in 1506, still believing that he had reached Asia. He was buried in an elaborate tomb in Seville, Spain. At the time of the explorer's death, thousands of Indians were dying in Hispaniola, to considerably less fanfare. Harsh living conditions and diseases introduced by the Spanish took a devastating toll. By 1519, the native population had declined from 100,000 to less than 3,000. But this wouldn't stop a continuous flow of gold to Spain.
I think perhaps the best example one ever has of the ruthless pursuit of gold is the instruction that King Ferdinand II of Spain is supposed to have given to his admirals setting out to South America, saying, get gold, humanely if you can, but at all hazards, get gold. And I think very sadly, they took him at his word.
They came for a variety of motives. The glory of God, the conversion of people who were not Christian, the glory of Spain, military glory, increased territory, and greed. They wanted gold.
Francisco Pizarro, an illiterate adventurer, was among the most ruthless. Pizarro was part of a new breed of Spanish explorers known as Conquistadors. He had been following other conquistadors for a decade through Central America. By 1523, at the age of 48, he was ready to leave.
Pizarro said, he admitted the truth. He said, I didn't go there to convert these people. Anybody else wants to do it is fine. I came here to get gold.
For 9 years, Pizarro toiled with exploration, colonization, and conversions of native Indians down the western coast of South America. Many natives succumbed to Spanish rule. Those who didn't were slaughtered.
There was a legal device developed, which was called the requerimiento. The requerimiento is that whenever the Spaniards arrived to one place and they were going to conquer that place, first they had to read the Bible. If the Bible was not accepted, they had the legitimate title of making war to these people because they were not accepted the word of Christ.
This strategy worked in village after village across South America.
They saw that they had the opportunity not only to steal the gold of the people, but also to use the labor of these people to mine even more gold. How could they justify this? Some of the conquistadores claimed that they could justify this simply because these people were heathens.
As the years passed, Pizarro's quest for gold became an obsession, fueled by native rumors of a kingdom of gold that existed beyond the forbidding Andes Mountains. Pizarro would dedicate his life to finding this kingdom of gold, but he would need his venture ordained by a new Spanish monarch, Charles V, the grandson of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. In 1528, Pizarro returned to Spain to gain support for his campaign into Peru. Pizarro's account of the Kingdom of Gold was all King Charles needed. 3 years later, Pizarro returned to South America, armed with the authority to begin his conquest of the Inca Empire. Driven by a lust for gold, Pizarro led an army of 200 men on a grueling 6-month journey. Along the way, they destroyed villages, killed natives, and robbed them of their gold. At last, on the afternoon of November 16, 1532, they reached the outskirts of the Inca city of Cajamarca. In the distance, a shimmering mirage appeared. 40,000 Incas bedecked in gold. So much gold marveled one Spaniard that their army blazed like the sun itself.
Gold was used to make objects that the Incas could use for ceremonial purposes. These items include vases, jewelry, and most importantly cups, used during ceremonies while making offerings to the gods.
The Incas welcomed the small Spanish army as Pizarro prepared to meet a man worshipped by the Indians as a living god, the Emperor Atahualpa, known to his people as the Inca.
Nobody would dare to look the face of the Inca because he was a divine person. He was the son of the sun. He was absolutely beyond any kind of human standard.
When Atahualpa heard about Pizarro's arrival, he presented gifts that were considered valuable to the Incas. When Pizarro received the dry dog, woven cloth, and other items, he said, "This is trash. This is an insult, and he threw the gifts away.
Pizarro wanted gold, but his soldiers were outnumbered 200 to 1. If the Spaniards could capture Atahualpa alive, they would control the entire Inca Empire. Pizarro set a trap by which he would meet the Inca under a banner of truce. Pizarro's men waited in hiding as a gold-plated litter entered the city bearing the Inca. A handsome, muscular man in his 30s.
When they approached to Atahualpa, there was this Father Valverde who went to see him with his Bible to read the requerimiento. What Atahualpa did was to grab the Bible, since the priest was saying that it was the word of Christ. He put it in his ear to see if the book was going to tell him something about that. Since he didn't hear anything, he threw the Bible to the ground. At that particular moment is when the order of attacking the Indians was given.
Pizarro had offered Atahualpa the most sacred symbol of Christianity, the Bible. And once the Inca had thrown the holy book to the ground, the fate of the Incan civilization was sealed. Pizarro's men opened fire with a volley of muskets and then charged with swords and lances. The wooden spears and arrows of the Incas were no match for Spanish armor.
Debemos tener presente
We must recognize that when the Spaniards arrived, they had a long history of war in Europe, in Italy, Switzerland, and in Holland. The Spanish troops were well trained and well experienced with a superior military capacity in firearms, iron, and horses.
The sight of the armored men on horseback terrified the Incas.
In the beginning, they thought that they were part humans and part horse. The rider of the horse and the horse itself were the same thing.
It was the most lopsided victory in history. In half an hour, 5,000 Incas were slaughtered. Not one Spaniard lost his life. Pizarro himself suffered the only wound, a gash to his left hand, received when he protected Atahualpa from a battle-crazed swordsman. The Inca emperor, taken prisoner, tried to bargain for his life.
And he made a pact with Pizarro that if he had his subjects bring enough gold to fill this room, Pizarro would let him free.
He had promised to fill a room with gold to the height up to his finger standing up reach.
The Incas proceeded to bring from all over Peru these gorgeous ornaments that they had made, these wonderful works of art. And they piled it up in this room until it was full.
The room was filled with more than 5 tons of gold, enough to make each conquistador a rich man.
I think someone's calculated in today's terms it would have been worth, I think, somewhere between $50 and $60 million, the amount of gold that came back just from that ransom.
Atahualpa was true to his word, but Pizarro wasn't. The emperor was held prisoner for a year before he was tried for the crime of simply being an Inca. He was sentenced to burn at the stake.
The Incas believed that there will be a return to life. That is why it was so important to conserve bodies by mummification.
Atahualpa begged Pizarro to choose another method.
They gave him the alternative that if he would become Christian, a different kind of death will be given to him. So he decided to become Christian.
On August 29, 1533, a friar baptized the emperor and christened him Don Francisco Atahualpa. As he heard his Christian name, the Inca was strangled. Pizarro burned his body anyway. The priceless golden treasures of the Incas were melted down and shipped to Spain.
So that is the sad thing, because there's no descriptions about what was melted there. There's no description of the objects that were melted. Everything was destroyed forever.
The only way we can get an idea of this loss is when we see those few surviving pieces of pre-Columbian art that are today conserved in museums. The cultural loss is simply incalculable.
The Spanish ruled Peru for 3 centuries, enslaving the people, leveling their cities, looting their gold. But one of the Incas' greatest treasures was overlooked and untouched until 1911. The sacred city of Machu Picchu. Hidden in a nook of the Andes, it was found almost intact. One of the wonders of the New World, Machu Picchu sprawls across 5 square miles, a city carved out of the mountain. These religious shrines are among a handful that survived the conquest of Peru. And their walls still echo with the legends of Inca gold.
Today, there are many tales about gold that is hidden in mountains, gold that is hidden in lakes, gold that is scattered in many places, but that was hidden by Indian people. People who became very wealthy in the Andes. Generally, they say that the reason why they are wealthy is because they were able to find this gold that was hid by the soldiers of the Incas.
By the mid-16th century, Spain was the first empire on which the sun never set, enriched by the conquest of the Americas.
There's this huge increase in the gold imports into Spain, and you see there the huge quantity of gold that actually was being melted down, because this was not because of gold mines, this was absolutely melted treasure.
But that wasn't enough. They also then had to enslave the indigenous people and put them to work in the mines, producing even more gold, which could then again be shipped back to Europe and used as money to finance Spain's domination of the world.
Spain became very prosperous. No, this is the moment in which all the literature developed. Is the moment when the arts, Baroque starts during that period. Is a period of prosperity, which is very important for culture.
In 1556, Emperor Charles V turned over the Spanish throne to his son, Philip II, a devout Catholic who dedicated his life to eliminating Protestantism from Europe. To fund his objectives, Philip used the vast wealth of gold coming from the Americas. But on the open seas, the gold-laden ships were vulnerable, particularly to Philip's most formidable enemy, England, and her most famous privateer, Francis Drake.
You've got these very aggressive pirates, plunderers, they might call themselves explorers as well. What were they in pursuit of? Essentially, they were in pursuit of Spanish ships with gold and silver on them.
These people started out as brigands, as pirates, if you like, people like Drake, who would simply take over Spanish ships that they met on the oceans, plunder them for any treasure that was there, and either turn the Spanish sailors into slaves on their own ships or kill them.
Throughout the 1570s, Drake attacked Spanish galleons at sea and Spanish settlements in the New World, stealing a fortune of Philip's new gold. His exploits rained terror upon Spanish sailors, earning him the nickname El Drake, the Dragon. Drake was the most successful privateer of his time and a close friend of the Queen. Elizabeth herself sponsored his most profitable voyage in 1577. A 3-year journey west during which he boldly attacked and plundered Spanish ships and Spanish settlements. The trip also resulted in the first circumnavigation of the world by an Englishman. When he returned in 1580, he bestowed upon his queen Spanish gold worth over £500,000 English pounds. In Spain, Philip demanded Drake's head. In England, Queen Elizabeth knighted him. An infuriated Philip, from his mountaintop retreat called the Escorial, plotted his revenge on Elizabeth and England. The Escorial was part palace, part monastery. built by Philip in 1563, and paid for with gold taken from the Americas. Philip used his vast wealth for the glory of Spain, not himself. From breakfast to bedtime, Philip toiled like a common bureaucrat. He personally read reports from his mints and accounts from his gold mines. Pious to the point of austerity, he dressed like a common monk. Visitors mistook him for one of his own servants. In the hallways and chapels of the Escorial, Philip pondered and prayed for a solution to his two biggest problems: English pirates and English Protestants.
In those times, all the answers related to religion, probably more than anything else. This was the ideological driving force, and the Spaniards in particular were passionate about their Catholicism.
His answer was a gold-financed holy war brought directly to England's Protestant shores. Philip commissioned the building of what would become the mightiest fleet of warships the world had yet seen: the Spanish Armada. But Drake's ship would attack first. In 1587, against Elizabeth's wishes, he sailed into the Spanish port of Cadiz and set fire to Philip's unfinished fleet. Despite the devastating assault, Philip hurriedly rebuilt his armada. By the summer of 1588, Philip's Spanish fleet was ready to sail. 30,000 soldiers, aboard 130 ships, sailed for the English Channel. They would be greeted by Philip's old nemesis, Sir Francis Drake, now a vice admiral. English guns and English weather took a devastating toll on the Spanish ships. When Philip got news of the Armada's defeat, he simply dug deeper into his pot of gold.
Gold conveys a sense of power, and the Spaniards, after they brought all this gold in from the Western Hemisphere, from the New World, thought they ruled the world and they had all the answers.
For 2 more decades, Philip financed his crusade against Protestantism with gold from the New World. But the cost of world domination was more than Philip's gold could buy.
They did gradually lose their position of ultimate power over the world's oceans, and that was really what cut off the flow of gold and ultimately led to the decline of Spain as a world power.
Finally, the gold ran out. Spain was bankrupt. The mightiest king on earth was reduced to placing collection boxes on the streets.
One of the recurrent features in the history of gold is really the Midas story, that having a lot of it doesn't necessarily bring you happiness. I mean, you think you're powerful because you got it, but in fact, you're enslaved by it.
In the end, the clouds of war dimmed Spain's golden age.
And instead of becoming the wealthiest country in Europe, which they should have with all of this stuff, they ended up as one of the poorest countries in Europe. They blew it.
At 71, Philip was carried into this room, where he could gaze upon the golden altar he built to God. He lay there for 53 days, racked by sores, paralyzed, and blind in one eye. When he died, he was clutching a simple wooden cross.
Essentially, the gold that the Spaniards had brought back from South America, being plundered by, in particular, Great Britain, meant that Great Britain then became the biggest power in terms of its military position in the world. Military in the broadest sense, including the seas, which were very important.